You know what? I was gonna say. Mic check, mic check. Hey, it's Thursday, it's 5 o'clock, it's Tony and Chelsea live, and everything is broken. The computer that streams is broken, and Chelsea is broken. She might show up in a little bit. Anyway, today we're looking at your photos that include lines as a key architectural element. We'll look at them live in just a minute. But first, this episode is brought to you by Squarespace, and Chelsea usually says the stuff about Squarespace. Whether you need a domain, website, or online store, make your next move with Squarespace. Squarespace is an awesome website hosting platform with beautiful award-winning design templates and 24/7 customer support. Start your free trial today at squarespace.com/Tony and use the coupon code portfolio after a 14-day free trial to get 10% off. Thank you for hosting at Squarespace. They're great for portfolios or like any type of website that you can imagine. For example, if you're a cobbler and you need a website for your cobbling business, Squarespace would be perfect. There's two ways you can interact with us today. You can use hashtag TCLive on Instagram or Twitter. And if stuff works, then our producer Justin here in studio can put it on screen. Look, that's working. Or you can write in the comment section, and our producer Siobhan out in Philly will read those comments and possibly pop up on the screen and ask us.
There's Siobhan. Sorry, Siobhan.
Siobhan's working too. Today's a challenging day. Like I said, we're looking at your lines photos today, so you can go to sdp.io/submit. My slide is broken. sdp.io/submit to send in your lines photos, and we'll take a look at them in just a second. Next week, on Thursday, we're looking at long exposure photos. This is actually a photo that I took. That title's messing it up a little, but a photo that I took this past week while we were in Thailand, which is why I'm so tired, because I just got in town yesterday, and that's like an 11 or 12-hour jet lag. Like, it's as much jet lag as you can possibly have. Like, if you went further around the Earth, you'd be getting closer. Anyway, Chelsea and I are really exhausted. Anyway, I really like this picture. It was a long exposure of a fire dancer, and I just like the composition and the way the fire turned out around his body. And I put it on my Instagram, and nobody especially liked it. Not nearly as much as like a super cheesy sunrise picture that I took. And that's like the most frustrating part of being a photographer, is that you put so much effort into things and people pretty much just like sunrise and palm trees. I'll import your pictures now. And in the meantime, I would usually get Chelsea to talk and entertain you. It's a challenge. One sec while I import some stuff. Okay,
Tony, I can fill you in on what happens when you do a super chat message.
Oh, okay. What super chat is, you can, in the chats, you can actually pay some money and then something happens. But what happens, Siobhan? Because I did one earlier.
It doesn't pin it to the top. I think maybe that only happens not during live comments, but it just shows up in a big blue bar. And a couple people have done it since you did yours.
Wow, people are actually using it. I thought they specifically said that it made it stay up. Well, if you're watching the live show, I guess you can make your comment appear with a background.
Yeah, I assume that maybe that happens during like not live shows, but it doesn't seem to be happening for the live chat.
Okay, well, thanks to the people who bought us a beer by having your comment appear pinned, I guess, or appear super. Okay, lines photos. And I know we're going to get a lot of pictures today that seem a little bit off theme, because it's not just like any picture that has a line in it, because almost any picture has a line in it. But I want the line to be a key compositional element. And one of the things I know we're going to see a lot of is like this picture, where the lines, there are lots of lines. There are vertical lines here. There's lines of this rail coming in here. One thing you should look for is if you're using lines like this, those lines will draw your eye here, but it kind of needs to go somewhere interesting. And, kind of goes towards this church here, but there's or whatever the door is, but there's not much else happening there. Like there needs to, if there's a focal point, there should be something of interest there. But otherwise, it seems like a good picture. And this picture also, it has lines, but I don't know that the lines are much of a compositional element. But I think it's a cool building. I would definitely like to see something else going on. The sky is nice, but you know, there's not really like a focal point in it. Beautiful skyline, beautiful city. You had a good time of day because you have some orange in the setting, the sunset sky. So you're during the blue hour, within an hour of the sun setting, and definitely makes things more interesting. But at the same time, you know, lines here aren't a key compositional element. It's just an image that includes some lines. Definitely, if you have like powerful horizontal lines like that, make sure the image is on level. Pretty easy fix in post. Here the lines are the composition. It comes out as almost an abstract form, and I really like it because of this kind of balance that it has. You can see this major line here runs from one corner to the other. Just a beautiful picture. I'm going to give it a pick. I'm also going to add some more contrast, though. You can see you want to check out the histogram and make sure that you have some kind of white points. I'm just going to brighten it up a little. If you look at the before and after, you know, there's no reason not to give it that extra pop. You know, especially with black and white photos, you don't want it to just be like gray and black. This is, I always forget the name of that building. I think it's in New York, but a gorgeous example of a place that uses lines really well. Most of the credit, of course, goes to the architect who designed it, but as a photographer, it makes a great place to take pictures. And I think it's a really nice shot, and great job with the exposure too. Nice and bright. You can look at the histogram and see there's plenty of white in there. Nicely done. Also perfectly centered. That's a real challenge. Power lines are kind of an inevitable side effect of just about any type of photography in the modern world. And I think here, this particular power line adds some interest to it, though as far as, you know, it doesn't necessarily like add balance or composition. I like these kind of abstract pictures. And here the only thing we really see are the powerful lines. I'm going to give this one a pick too, just because this is kind of my style. Nicely done. Okay, this is a gorgeous example of using mood. I really like the heavy fog. I don't even know that it necessarily needs any additional focal points like a train. What I do want to see is these train tracks brightened up a little bit. And I think the best way to do that is if I brighten up the whole picture, it's going to blow that sky out. And that's not really what we want. So I think what I'll do is I'll brighten up the whole picture and adjust it so that those train tracks look good, since that's the most important part of the image. And then I'm going to use a graduated filter. I covered this trick not too long ago in a separate video. I'm going to drop that graduated filter on there and then use that to adjust the sky separately. And then I could click the brush here, make it a little smaller, and remove that part just so it blends a little bit better. So if you look at the before and after, you see it's not too much different. I just added a little bit of pop to it. I could have done a better job in blending that in. Gorgeous picture here. And here the lines are not necessarily like, the key lines to me aren't this main line here, but rather the kind of virtual lines made by this old pier creating a vanishing point, and just kind of leaves your eye down here. The sky is really powerful here, and that's going to be a key part of it. I had a video just last week called something like "Fringing is not good," something along those lines. And you can see we have some pretty severe fringing as we get close to here. And that pops out to my eye, but everybody will kind of notice it on some level. And it makes it look artificial. Like it's a sure giveaway that you've undergone some heavy processing. And usually that's something we want to avoid. So watch that video, and instead of making the adjustments you made, use it like a nice graduated filter like I just demonstrated. And that'll make that fringing go right away. This is gorgeous. I mean, for every time I've gotten airplanes flying through my long exposures, it's largely ruined the picture. but I've never seen quite such a beautiful arc. It's almost like you planned it. So I'm going to give that a pick, especially with the reflection that you got in the water down there. Very nice. You don't have to do anything. I can see you stitch together multiple different exposures, multiple different 30-second exposures, because there's a couple of gaps. Like, look at that gap and look at that gap. You could go back in and kind of fill that in. It would be better done in Photoshop, but I might just be able to just fake it a little bit like this so you can see what I mean. Okay, that's not perfect. I should feather it some. But you can see that it's a little bit better because those gaps kind of draw your eye away from it, and it's just a side effect of the particular technique you used during stitching. Otherwise, be careful about that fringing again. Use a graduated filter instead of whatever method you used. But very cool shot. What I'm debating here is whether I want more depth of field, and I think that I do. You're shooting at f4, and with a close focus like that, that's enough that it casts this part of the picture out of focus, but that background blur isn't adding anything to it, so I think we'd be happier if this were in focus too. So use a higher f-stop, but otherwise I think it's a really nice subject. And I like this photo, though I have a hard time describing exactly why. It has a good mood. I like the haze here, and the fact that there's so much contrast that highlights the shape of the gate up here as well as that lock make it really work for me. Other than that, I wish I had some more constructive criticism. Here, the vanishing point is created by creating like symmetry, which I know took some care to get yourself exactly centered down the middle of that bridge, at least pretty close. It can be hard to make sure you're exactly centered. It helps to like pull up the grid overlay on your camera if you can, and then just kind of shift side to side to make sure that you nail it. But overall, very nice picture. I'm even wondering if I want to brighten it up a little more, just because there's not really much detail in the sky. So it might be nice just to blow it out completely. Okay, beautiful example of working with lines, and beautiful example of architecture, really. Here the photographer has found a nice subject, but hasn't added all that much to it. But it's a gorgeous building, and clearly the architect knew how to use lines for visual appeal. So using the fence here provides some context, but I don't know that the lines are necessarily adding anything to it. I mean, we can see that they're looking through a fence, but they're not complementing the background or drawing your eye to a particular location. At least that's my take on it. And here again, we have lines, and they do form an interesting shape, but they don't go anywhere. They succeed in leading your eye through here, but it doesn't like bring your eye to some focal point where you feel rewarded. Nonetheless, I think there's a shape, an interesting picture in here, because this is such an interesting street light, and these lines are so nice, almost like 50s science fiction-y. Yeah, maybe if we could have moved forward past this and just kind of focused on those lines, might have been able to do something with it. This is a really interesting picture. Yeah, I like this picture. I'm just overall going to brighten it up a little and then just drop the sky down here a little. Just a little. That down some. See the before and after. Sorry, I'm just trying to go to the next picture. What's going on? Am I done? No. Sorry, Lightroom wasn't responding to me. Usually there's Chelsea here to talk. It's rough to go this show alone. Okay. Here we have a ton of lines, but again, they don't necessarily do much to support the image. And I want to bring up an interesting point about contrast. Now, the main subject here is this person walking. That's where your eye goes. But unfortunately, that person is almost devoid of any kind of contrast because they're wearing dark, they're in shadow, and they're against a dark background. And as a result, there's not a lot of pop. Now, if this same person were standing here against this brightly lit sidewalk, they would pop and the picture would be much more powerful. So think about that as far as the timing goes, because especially as a photographer, you know what the subject is and your eye goes there, and in your mind, that person as a subject will have much more pop because you're already thinking about it. But as somebody coming in cold to the picture, this just isn't a powerful focal point, and it almost disappears. So think about that contrast and what you can do to get like a dark subject against a light background or vice versa. Slim fit photographer. I didn't know they made pants just for photographers. And a shirt too. Okay, that's cool. What's going on? Is this spot color where it's spot color except for the quick dry tag, or is that somehow a color image that is almost completely black and white? No, it's not. Okay. I don't know. Sorry, I don't know what to do about that image. Here, it's almost completely black. Like, as you look at the histogram, you can see there's just a couple of splotches of lightness. And so all I really see are these two power lines here and then this line here. And I feel like it just needs to be a little bit more. So I actually think the lines here are interesting. What we kind of get more of is this line here and then these two power lines. I think this is an interesting shape. It has a nice balance, and then we have this line here and this line coming down. And overall, I think the arrangement of those things, especially using water as a line, is pretty compelling. I'm going to try to also fix this white balance. Yeah, it's really tough to fix a white balance on a picture like that. Let me see, just because of the way the lights are at night. Maybe black and white can work better. Pull down these highlights a little bit. Try to increase the exposure some more overall. I think this is a winning image with some selective dodging and burning. I want to see this line here brought up a little more prominent, so you could dodge that line and make it appear a little bit more, and maybe even burn like this car in the background, since it's a little distracting in this shape here a little bit. So burn out some of the distractions, dodge up some of the like key elements. So let me see here. This image has been HDR'd, and one of the things that happens with HDR is HDR removes contrast. Now, this sun, of course, it's the brightest thing in our solar system. You're shooting right into it. It should be white, right? It should be full bright white. It's not bright white. It's something less than white. So let's grab that white slider, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and then we're going to drag it to the right. But that's one of the things that will, look how far I have to pull it before that sun gets to be white. And of course, like the ground here shouldn't be brighter than the sun. So that's something to keep in mind when you do HDR processing. One of the things I recommend doing in chapter 11 of Stunning Digital Photography is if you HDR a photo, you might grab the original image and then selectively blend the original image back into the HDR image using layers. So one of the things you could have done, I'll just walk this back, is to bring the original sunburst into this image so that it was nice and bright. And that would have definitely toned down the HDR look and made it seem more natural while still giving you the greater dynamic range and maybe even the greater texture that you want. Beautiful picture. You're going to get a pick right away. The lines here are powerful. Like, look how they all come right in towards this tree. I talked about contrast earlier. This is a great example of it because we have a dark tree against a bright white background, so that tree just completely pops. It's a perfect example of that. Man, what else can I say? It's absolutely great. I want to center that tree because you can see it's almost centered, but not quite centered. So let's lock that ratio, and then I'm going to pull this in. Yeah, just because it's going to be that much more powerful, it's perfectly centered. It's okay for things to be off center, but it should be deliberate. You know, you don't want to be like 5% off center. If you're going to go off center, it should be 30%, not just a little bit. So I went ahead and made that perfect. I might also increase the contrast just a little bit. Like I think we're still missing a white point here. So let's brighten that up a little. And all the graduated filters today. Let's reverse that. And I'll bring this down.
Hey, Tony, they're requesting in the comments that you press the I key a couple times to show the names of the submitters.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll have to go into the options. I don't know how I'm losing my... Oh, maybe this particular image doesn't have metadata. Okay, so Chad Hill. There you go. Okay, so I just brightened up the foreground a little bit to better accentuate these lines. It didn't really need anything. Like I said, I absolutely love this picture. You can see the changes I did were pretty minor. Anyway, I'll give you a pick. Nicely done. Chad. This picture's pretty washed out too, so the first thing I'll do is just brighten that up. And... oh, I have a brush selected, that's why. Okay, now you're on train tracks. We need a focal point. You could wait around for a train to come, but there should be something here because we have all these converging lines that are leading to right here. We have a little bit of skyline down there, but it'd be nice if there was something a little more prominent. It's a good opportunity to take like a slow, like a long exposure and get some movement as the train kind of goes past.
Did you see that Amtrak come and hit that snow yesterday?
Oh yeah, like the reason you shouldn't stand next to
yeah, it was
train tracks in the snow.
It was just cool, yeah.
Justin, this is Leaving Lee Vining.
Wow. Yeah, that looks like it. Yeah,
it's gorgeous, right? Place in the California Sierras. Beautiful picture. I think I photographed this exact same road. Let's see. I'm trying to get this to zoom in a little bit. Incredibly sharp, taken with the Canon 6D. Okay, pick. Now, I will say you should at least consider waiting for a car to come into the frame here. And let me see. I'm going to pull up my own portfolio. Oh, hi. Now I'm actually on chat. Because I have a very similar picture taken in a very similar spot. Let me see if I can scroll back. No. I have to scroll all the way through my own portfolio. So here we are looking at my own work. I can go to thumbnails here. Okay, here we go. So it might even be the same mountain range. I stood in the center of the road, which was a little scary, and waited for something to come through just so I'd have a bit of a focal point there. You don't necessarily need it. The picture will tell a different story with and without a car, but I would say get them both ways, because take a picture without a car and then take a picture with a car or with a variety of different cars coming in different directions, different colors, and then you can kind of see which one you like better. Maybe you did that and maybe you just liked it better without the car. Christina says, lines, my garage, how boring. And I would say that there is the potential for a picture here, but there are a few distractions because the lines here are interesting, like the lines of this and the lines of this. But then we have this kind of clutter in the background. And if you want like basic lines to be, to make a good picture, you have to eliminate things that might be more visually interesting. And one of the aspects of conveying visual weight is complexity. There's a lot of detail in here in these branches and in this house. And that's just going to steal the eye away from these very basic lines. So you could move forward a little bit and just get the sky in the background, and that would help hide those things. I actually think this is a really beautiful arrangement of lines, the way they crisscross here. I find the feet up here to be a little bit distracting, but it's not bad. And there's something I just really like about this picture, so I will give it a pick. Siobhan, do we have any questions or comments? I'll pull up Chit Chat, and
certainly
it's not going to be nearly as entertaining without Chelsea reading them, but I'll do what I can.
In short lighting, do you focus on the closest eye or the brightest eye?
I have only ever focused on the closest eye. Yeah, I'm trying to imagine it with the focus on the far eye, and I've never seen that where I thought that was the right thing. but you could shoot it both ways and see what would look better. But
even
yeah,
if the front eye was like in shadow, you would still focus on the front eye.
Yeah, short lighting, for people who don't know, is when like the far side of the face is lit, so that like less of the face is lit than not lit, and broad lighting would be if like the light were over here and that bigger, more prominent side of my face were lit. But I assume that the eye isn't completely disappearing. But if you're unsure, you can always crank up the f-stop some and try to get both of the eyes in focus, because that certain amount of background blur is often a distraction. What else do you have, Siobhan?
How can a beginner get sponsored for travel photography?
Good luck. I mean, travel photography is one of those things that takes years, and getting sponsored is incredibly hard. I think the most prominent, the most likely path for people nowadays is to build up a solid Instagram following, because there are places who will sponsor Instagram accounts. Now, that can start with as few as 10 or 20,000 followers. It's more likely to happen if you're at 100,000 or more followers. Just to give you some benchmarks. So you're not a beginner if you have 10,000 followers. Clearly you have some skills at that point. Oh, man, I don't know. Justin or Siobhan, do you have any tips? It seems like he wants to travel for free and he's willing to take pictures, but that kind of describes like just about everybody in photography. Like we all want to do that.
Yeah,
so.
I would love that.
Yeah, I think
I don't
your
think
answer.
that's something you get as a beginner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so the answer is, as a beginner, you can travel at pretty cheap prices nowadays. That's your option. You fly standby. You travel wherever you can get a ticket to, or you get on a Greyhound and you travel the country for a couple of dollars, and then maybe you Airbnb or you backpack and sleep in a sleeping bag or stay at a hostel or something. So I think your odds of traveling really cheap are much better than finding somebody to actually fund it for you. Sorry, I don't have a better idea. Let's go through chit chat. Here's somebody who says, "You always look like you just got out of the shower and didn't dry off." And I put a picture of me there. Maybe y'all can take a look at this and figure out what the hell he means, because sometimes I just like to try to figure out what they were talking about. Now, from firsthand experience, I know what I look like when I get out of the shower and don't dry off. And tip, I'm not wearing clothes and I'm soaking wet. And when I look at myself in this picture, it seems like I'm wearing clothes and I'm not wet. So what am I missing? Like, what about that?
You do have gorgeously shiny hair. Maybe they associate that with being wet.
Okay. Simon says, "I have a confession to make. I love these long camera tutorials. They help put me to sleep. I put it on at bedtime and I fall asleep very quickly. If I wake up in the night, I press replay and I sleep another full cycle and on through the night. Thanks for helping me sleep so well, Tony." Yeah, my pleasure. Tony, the living sleeping pill. That explains all those views we get on those tutorials. How do you tell if a photo is HDR? When everyone on the show recoils in horror. Thank you, Egan. You nailed that one. Uh-oh, Chelsea gave in to the 90s choker trend from Kyle. Glad Chelsea's not here. She'd probably never forgive you. She's super sensitive. She's not. "I love your show and will love this comment on it. I'm only 12, but I love this channel." Okay, thanks, Cheesecake Productions. You did it. Hi. I don't get why some people complain so much. My picture didn't get reviewed. And if it does, they get mad because of what they said. The page is too slow. I don't like Tony's hair. I got all of that up until the part about my hair. Is that just a common complaint? I could change it, I guess. What would people do if I just decided to get some Just for Men and dial it back about 35 years to when I had brown hair?
Oh man, people would roast the crap out of you if you dyed your hair.
I know. I almost want to do it just for that, just so I can hear the onslaught. I've thought about doing it on April 1st, just putting up some completely innocuous video where I have like some temporary dye in my hair, just so I can listen to the onslaught of what people have to say about me trying to recapture my youth or something. I've had like various stages of gray hair since I was in my early 20s. It's definitely continues to
get... It's pretty unfair that men can't get away with that the way women can.
Oh, dyeing their hair.
You're not allowed to be vain in that way.
Yeah, you're right. Women show up with a completely different hair color. Well, as you do sometimes, Siobhan. I never know what... When you fire up Skype, it could be something completely different. Everybody's like, oh, I love the hair color today.
I could have gone gray at 20 and none of y'all would know.
Yeah. Tropical Geek. Squarespace. Whether you're an author, yoga instructor, real estate agent, massage therapist, stunt driver, brewmaster, dog walker, celebrity impersonator, oil tank cleaner, greeting card writer, or happiness consultant, it's the perfect way to make your own website. I totally agree, Tropical Geek. And that's a great way to segue into our portfolio review. So let me see. I'm going to pull up a couple of these pages. These are portfolios that have been sent in during the course of the live show, which I like to do it that way because it makes it a little more uncomfortable for me, because I know that as I'm reviewing this, that person is standing there right at the moment listening to me say potentially negative things about his or her portfolio. So what I'm doing now is I'm flipping through all the different portfolios they sent in for the one that really catches my eye. Man, several of these have just great opening pages. I am curious about this one, though. Christian Vieira. What happens if I press play? I've never seen, like, a video. Oh, man. I am already out of patience. This is unbearable. Okay, well, now it's getting better. Okay, first, when I loaded the page up, it already showed me this, like, as a thumbnail. So make it a thumbnail, but when I click play, man, you can't be asking me to hang around for 6 seconds. Like, people don't sit through 6 seconds of stuff. You don't know. That's a long time. Oh, man, this is great. So I think we're looking at a filmmaker. I see we're on the producing tab, and that's the default tab.
Wow, that is pretty awesome.
So we're looking at his reel, which is something a filmmaker would put together to kind of show off the work, what they can do. Here he's showing off some visual effects. I think it's a great reel. I know it's not really what we typically review on this show, but we're kind of filmmakers. YouTubists are filmmakers who just only receive disgust from the rest of the filmmaking community. But this all looks gorgeous. Fantastic use of light and composition and hair and makeup and movement. Yeah. I won't sit through it all, but your reel looks fantastic. I would definitely hire you in a second. Let's see what XTN Vieira has for photography. This is definitely a challenging layout to work with, as it's similar to Instagram in that everything is forced to square. Oh man, are these different photos or different categories? And you can see the square format works great for some things and not great for others. Like this picture doesn't work in the square format at all because I think all the interesting parts have been cropped out, but this one works really well. This one works really well. So if you are going to use the square format, you might have to like more carefully create the thumbnails. Let's see what, yeah, see how powerful this shot is in full form and just how weak it is when it's cropped to square. So you might have to reconsider that. I know it works better when all the pictures are the same shape because you can just blend them like this. But Mono Lake, wow. Everything is happening in the Sierras today. I don't even quite know why. That's a gorgeous picture. Beautiful. Yeah, just great shots. You definitely have a style that I see, kind of high contrast and yet nice and clean compositions. Let's find out a little bit more about XTN Vieira. Christian Vieira. Oh yeah, that's the same guy who sent in the other picture, right? Or maybe not. Okay. He's left-handed. I'm glad you're leading with the most important information because, like, for us, we don't work with left-handed people. So that would allow me to just quickly move on to somebody else. Okay, he's from New Hampshire. Thanks for sending in your portfolio, Christian. Everything looks great. I'm sorry I don't have more detailed information, like detailed recommendations, other than maybe changing those thumbnails. Christian says, I've used Squarespace for a couple of websites now. I love how simple it is to set up, especially since I don't have any coding experience. The range of templates are terrific, and I can still customize it to my liking. Thanks. Thank you for sending in your portfolio, Christian. If you want to send in your own portfolio, if you want to create your own portfolio or any type of website, for example, you could be a filmmaker or a person who dog ears books for a living, go to squarespace.com/Tony. Get a 14-day free trial, no credit card required. If you like it, you can try it out. It's cool to set up your portfolio just to narrow down your pictures. If you like it, use a coupon code portfolio to get 10% off. And thanks for sponsoring us, Squarespace. I will take a look at a few more pictures. And in fact, you know what? I think I'll re-import pictures. I wonder if the sorting thing is still an issue. It didn't occur to me. Let's see what pictures people have sent in. Wow, so many pictures. Yeah, ever since I changed the way people upload pictures so it's faster, people have just gotten more and more efficient. Okay, yeah. See, I'm sorting them by added order, but for some reason they're still getting sorted by name. So what we're going to do is try to overcome this alphabetical bias by starting in the middle. Joseph Stahl, sailboats. I'm going to give this one a pick. I like that it's just about abstract. Just like such a clean composition, and black and white is just perfect for it. This is really nice too. Just like a study in texture. I think I want to see just a little more contrast to it, but it didn't need much. Nicely done. Now this, on the other hand, almost feels cluttered to me because we just have lines going everywhere, and the arrangement doesn't feel organic, but it also doesn't feel orderly. This is a much simpler composition. And I think if we're going to make this work under the theme of lines, we kind of have to go black and white because the colors are really distracting from like the key elements of the image. So a couple of things here. One is a focal point is desperately needed because like all these converging lines bring our eye to this door where nothing is really going on. The other is, I talked about it before, but if you're going to go for a symmetrical composition, you have to be very careful about centering yourself. Often you can look at the ground, at the flooring, and you'll see like maybe the concrete tile will be divided exactly down the middle. Sometimes you can just find some visual cue that will let you line yourself up because it's very, very hard to do it without some sort of assistance. It's very hard to visually line yourself up just looking at the back of the camera. But you can see it's not quite centered, but it's not off center enough that it feels deliberate. It feels non-deliberate, and that isn't as good as being deliberate. This image is so dark except for this bright part of the image over here that's kind of where my eye went, but that's definitely not where you want my eyes to go. I'm just going to peek in and see if there's something more interesting I can do here. I like this as a subject because we have these like powerful horizontal lines and we have these kind of converging lines here. And I think the bikes are interesting too. I think, here's what I think the image is. I think we have to get rid of all these distractions in the background. Just going to lock that. And then I think we need to, what I would do is grab that bike and tilt it at like a 30-degree angle. So I'd line up in the middle of that, and then maybe like the positioning of this bike where it's off center a little bit. But the purple color of this is kind of perfect. So the colors are working well here. Anyway, I think there's some potential in this scene if we just arrange the elements a little bit differently. And this is in Colne. Great shot, Katie. I like the use of negative space here. I might even push him a little bit more towards the outside corner. I can kind of simulate that a little bit, though. I don't know. Yeah, I think I blew it for you. I'm sorry, but perhaps you can see what I'm going for here. The balance on the outside of him was a little bit off, like he was closer to the top than closer to the side. So I can't necessarily fix that with cropping, but it's something to consider. And when in doubt, just shoot it multiple ways. Wow. Yeah, that's gorgeous, right? Especially since you managed to work in a bunch of cool airplanes at the bottom. Okay, I'm going to give you a pick because you have, looks like alien. I just assume that's aliens plus airplanes. Oh, man, and this one gets a pick too. Chelsea would love this one, so I'm going to give this one 5 stars from Chelsea. Kevin, man, this is a brilliant shot. I really love the use of the red and blue colors, and then everything else just being black and white, and the water. Man, gorgeous shot, really. All right, here, these wooden rails are a great way to use lines, and you manage the edge here carefully so it didn't crop in a weird way. I do think it's an interesting shot, and I like the blue color of the barn. Very nicely done. I want to give you some constructive feedback, but I don't know. I like it the way it is. I think you did good. Once again, we have powerful converging lines here and no kind of payoff, but I do think it's a good spot to keep in mind. Like it'd be a good spot for a portrait. And here, yeah, the composition is simple enough and it's contrasty enough that I feel like it does work in kind of an abstract sense. So I'm going to give that one a pick. I like it too. Let's go ahead and brighten this up a little bit just because it looks kind of washed out. It's a reflection of kind of the shadow of a tree. Yeah, I think it works. I think it works. I think it would work better as a print than something on my screen because it is very artistic. Anyway, great shot. Okay, let's get this brightened up some. I'm going to drag the whites and hold down the slider here. Okay, there we go. I like this picture a lot. I'm just pondering whether or not to crop it. And here's what I'm thinking about cropping it, because I love this dude shining through the bridge, and I love these powerful lines, and I even love like the way they come down into this. But there's so much detail down here that it definitely detracts from this as a focal point, because we have these powerful lines that draw your eye down here, and then you see this, and you think that's the focal point, it's the skyline, when he should be the focal point. So I think it depends on your audience. I think it depends on how the image is going to be presented. But I think in any sort of like online forum, I think we need to change this a little bit. Man, I don't know. That's tough because I want all of the bridge, but that skyline is really, really distracting. And maybe the right answer is to do that and then clone that out. Anyway, great concept. I'm going to give you a pick. I tried to help and I didn't find a great way to do it in post-processing. I don't see the need for the lack of white point here. It's not that you always need a white point. There are lots of exceptions where you don't need a white point, but the lack of a white point should feel like the washed outness is contributing to the mood or the story. And here, to me, it just looked like washed out. Maybe you're trying to tell a story of like a stormy day or something, but that didn't convey otherwise. I mean, if there were like some detail in the sky, or maybe if it were distinctly foggy, but I just wasn't seeing that. Okay. Great use of lines. You tilted at an angle that feels deliberate, and I think all that really works. I think it's a great shot. I also think you could hang out here and wait for a plane to go past and maybe catch it between two of these, just to add like that one extra thing. Now here we have a lot of buildings, and that's interesting, but there's not a lot of pop to it. I converted it to black and white just to reduce the distractions of the colors. Like the sign is a little bit red, and that really catches your eye, and some of these windows have color. So black and white can help balance that a little bit. But at the same time, there's nothing that draws my attention. So one thing you can do in cities in particular is to find like for a partly cloudy day and slap on an ND filter and do like a 30-second exposure or a 5-minute exposure and get those clouds kind of like forming wispy, feathery shapes in the sky. Anyway, it's just a way to kind of add an interesting element to it. It looks like a radio tower here. just powerful lines coming in the bottom. I don't necessarily understand the darkness here. Maybe we were just on the edge of one of these things and it was partly intruding into the frame. But I think it's interesting. I think it's abstract enough that it works. Okay. I'm wondering whether the color here really adds anything to it, and I don't think it's a pleasing color, that kind of off-white. So I think I'll just go black and white with it and then maybe just brighten it up a little bit. Nicely done, and I'm going to give it a pick. I just like it. Okay, so here we have some lines and some payoff. We have the horizon line and the line of the shore here, as well as this fence, and they lead up to the focal point, which is this nice tree, and that's like the perfect way to arrange these things. So I'm going to give that one a pick because you totally got it. You totally worked with the lines properly. Man, Chelsea and I were just debating what to do about train track pictures, because we've taken lots of pictures on train tracks, but just this past week, another kid died taking pictures on train tracks. And I don't even know how that happens because trains are so loud. Like when we go near the train tracks, man, you can hear those things coming forever and it rumbles and stuff. And when I was a kid, I always walked along train tracks and like there was no missing it. But people keep dying on train tracks. And I feel like it's a bad example if we use train tracks, because other people will see it and they'll try to recreate it, and I can't be doing something that's going to cause people to die. Anyway, sorry for all that. Nice shot. I just like, I'm concerned. I don't get how it keeps happening, but it does keep happening. Nonetheless, train tracks do make great lines, right? Because like the nice sweeping angles. This dude, right? It's all about that guy. And I'm going to give this one a pick because there's so much chaos in the image that it would almost be easily dismissed. And if this guy were in front of over here or over here, he would disappear completely. But he's a silhouette of a shape in front of a nice, clean, bright background. And it's that contrast that makes him work as a focal point. We looked at pictures earlier where there was a focal point, but they were in front of a detailed background, or there wasn't enough contrast in the luminance. Here we have great contrast. He has a great shape with his legs separated and his packages. So I'm going to give it a pick. Gorgeous, gorgeous picture. It works out really, really well. I don't know how you feel about post-processing. This kind of image is so artistic, you might just want to keep it pure. But if you feel okay with post-processing, it might be better off without this here. I just find that it's almost such a perfect shape that it's a little bit of a distraction to me. Pull down that feather and clean it up a little bit. That was a really sloppy edit, but you get the idea. Wow. This bridge is fantastic. Helix Bridge in Singapore. I was in Singapore for about an hour. Does that count? This is a perfect example of what I was just talking about, because the focal point is clearly these people here, but they're in front of a cluttered background, so it doesn't really pop, and therefore it doesn't feel deliberate. Now, if they were in front of like this white sky, there'd be pop. It would feel more deliberate. Another radio tower, or power lines, I guess. And, here I think, I'm just wondering if we were slightly off center. Well, I think it works. I mean, there's no particular focal point to it, but there are lines and they are converging. This is gorgeous. I presume this is like a wedding photographer and they're photographing maybe the veil. And I think that totally works. I give it a pick right away. The light coming through here is absolutely beautiful. Anyway, Martin, fantastic shot. Siobhan, I have done a remarkable amount of talking today.
You really have.
What's going on? Any people have anything interesting to say?
You're holding it down. There were a number of comments about the fact that electric trains are extremely quiet.
Oh.
And that one of the recent deaths, if not the one you were talking about, was that there were trains coming in opposite directions and the model just didn't get out of the way in time, which is horrifying.
Yeah, that is. And
don't do that, guys. Your picture's not as original as you think it is, and it's not worth dying for.
The more you know.
Dee, dee, dee. Okay.
Anything
If you
else,
had the
Joanne?
ability to create a perfect camera, what would you create?
Would you believe I have a whole video on this? I would say like 90% of the questions people ask me, I already have a video for. But if you search for Tony Northrup perfect camera, you'll see it. And trust me, I went on in like intense detail, as I do. But I would want, you know what? It's really close to the Sony A99 Mark II, which I've been working with for the last week. Like that's probably the closest I've ever come to my perfect camera. It has an electronic viewfinder. It's full frame. It has a lot of good lenses to it. It's not perfect. I'd like the focusing from the Nikon D5 or D500. And I'd like it to be a touchscreen, and I'd like the screen to flip out. But otherwise, I think that those are the only changes you'd have to make that A99 Mark II a perfect camera for me. Definitely a good starting point. I'll look at a couple more pictures, we'll take a couple more questions, and then I'll probably get out of here. This is a really challenging technique. You can see the lines here are formed by the brake lights of cars, and that's challenging because you don't see those lines as you're looking at it. So if you work with long exposures long enough, you'll begin to realize that those brake lights and headlights will form lines and that will become a compositional element. But you almost have to be able to see what the long exposure is going to look like to compose it. The balance between this line here and the Eiffel Tower here works out great. I'm going to give it a pick. So here we have, I'm just going to back up, and you can see like the amount of contrast and the power of these lines make everything feel deliberate, like this bright tower against the dark sky. And here the main lines have a very cluttered background that's of similar amounts of luminance, and that kind of takes away from everything. Now we have a fountain at the end here, but I almost didn't see it because of all these different like kind of distractions going on. Now, what can you do about that? Well, there's not a whole lot you could do. I will say you could wait for a foggy day. And that fog can be so useful at hiding distractions. So this can be your fog plan, right? Everybody should have a fog plan. If you wake up one morning and you look out the window and it's super foggy, you grab your camera and you head right here and see if you can do better than that picture. Here we have a lot of lines, but the only line that really feels deliberate to me are the lines here that do lead you to the sun rising or setting and reflecting on the water here, which is nice. I think I want to brighten that up a little bit and make it a little more powerful. Otherwise, a crop might be in order here. I know. Tony, cropping. But I haven't done this before. I'm just going to experiment. Just to try to simplify it a little bit. Okay. I love it. I'm going to give it a pick. I mean, it's abstract, but these three shapes and the chemtrails here are perfectly arranged.
You did not just say chemtrails on our show.
That was for Eric. Just a little nod for Eric. Okay, I pulled that way towards the blue, just because I couldn't look at it any further. But we have some powerful lines here, and again, they don't really lead anywhere. Like everything converges right around this, which is just like a solid piece of marble. And here we suffer from kind of the same problem, which is excessive amounts of detail that distract the eye from the key compositional lines. So brick buildings can just be kind of difficult that way, and also there's some color to it. Black and white can help a little bit, and I think if we were just to blow that sky out some more, that might just increase the contrast to enough to make the lines a little bit more of a compositional element. For me, what I thought were the things that caught my eye were the silhouettes here, and I sort of tried to look and make an interesting shape out of them because I think there's a potential for you to make really interesting silhouettes, but they're just these kind of street lights, so it didn't strike me as that interesting. What about in black and white? Now that we're in black and white, I can kind of adjust the luminance of the background since it was such a perfect green. So let's see if we can bring the contrast up some and just, okay. I don't know. The green is such a like a perfect and pretty color. Maybe it was better before. Once again, unless there's a compelling reason, you should probably strive to have some kind of white point here. And I think the additional contrast actually helps that a lot. I think this is abstract enough that I think it works just as a study online, so I'm going to give that a pick. Once again, here we have lines, but we also have a ton of distractions. So the line here is really a simple thing, and all this detail is definitely going to steal away all the attention. And what I would suggest doing is moving up close, standing where these people are, and maybe looking up to get the sky in the background, and just picking out a small piece of that bridge, like some sort of line here, and making that the picture, making it a compositional study of just lines. Peter Sykes. I wonder if that's Old Saybrook, like in Connecticut. Let's see if I can't get that sun to pop a little more by dropping the yellows. No. You know, oh, that's the saturation. I want to grab that. You know what I'm trying to do is, the sun here is almost completely fading out. I just want to add a little more contrast to it. So I'm trying to drag the yellows down. You might have to just dodge and burn that a little bit, just because you almost don't see the shape of the sun. It could use a little bit of help here. Peter shot at f10, which is enough to give him a little bit of a starburst effect, which looks nice. I definitely think this spot has some potential. I'm trying to think of what you should do. I mean, let's get the horizon level, right? Oh, you know what? Maybe it was pretty close. I think maybe it's just these lines that make the horizon feel like it's off level. Okay, I'm sorry I don't have a better suggestion for you. I think maybe it just needs some additional focal point, or maybe some clouds in the sky to make it interesting, but I do think it's a great spot. Once again, just the massive amount of distracting detail here takes away from the key elements. Also, that dog is just totally spazzing out. You can get him to stand still for a little bit. What if we pull the shadows up? Maybe we can reveal a little bit more interesting detail. I kind of wish it had been shot a little bit earlier in the day, because I think this is an interesting spot. It's just that the sky has fallen to black. Really powerful architectural lines here. Straighten it out some. So all these lines really bring your eye to these two people who are interesting. It might be more interesting if they were walking towards you. I'm also thinking about black and white on this, just because we have so many like bright colors here. You know, I think there's some real potential both to this spot in general and to this shot specifically. Just because these lines are so gorgeous, it can be difficult to capture. Thanks for that in, Philip. Pratik. Yeah, that's gorgeous, right? Yeah. I'm going to give that one a pick. Beautiful. Pratik had a fog plan. He showed up at his spot. I also think this would be a great spot for a model or to put somebody down here, but I also don't think it's absolutely necessary.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, man, more train tracks. Nice shot. Let's just move on. Okay. Need of a focal point because of those powerful convergings. This, as a study of lines, we would need this to have a little bit better balance. See how it's all just like right heavy? So you have the power to kind of control that by moving your camera around, changing your angle, and just think about just the basic balance of the overall image. I would also say this is so blurry, and yet it's a key part of the image that you would probably need a higher f-stop. I know it's going to change your background too, but you'll just have to control the background by moving your position. This is a beautiful use of lines here. I feel like these rocks might actually be a distraction, but you might be able to control that. Now, looking at the pillars here, I can see the bottoms of these pillars are stained, which to me tells me that this is tidal water. It's probably going to go up and down So you could wait for the tide to come up, hide all these things, and then maybe do another 30-second exposure, a long enough exposure that the water is smooth like this. And that would greatly simplify the composition by hiding this. We would just see like silky water. So something to think about. Here, the brake lights and headlights over the long exposure are creating like the most interesting part of the composition, but we've lost the sky. So you might consider doing this again just a little bit earlier in the day when you still have some light in the sky. The lines here are kind of implied by the different levels of this building. And, you know, it's kind of been a common theme, but I'm not sure that it's simple enough to be a straightforward study of composition. You know, we do have a lot of distractions, like actual details, like these, whatever they are, rivets or something. I'm sure they're not rivets. I don't know anything about construction. So if you're going to kind of overcome those distractions, if you can't get rid of those, then you probably need a focal point. This, on the other hand, I think works much better because it's a very simple image. There isn't really a focal point, but it can at some point become just a study in composition because it doesn't have those distractions. The one thing I want to suggest here is, I can see you focused right around here, but this is very prominent. Now, you don't need background blur in this image. You're not blurring out any unwanted details. So what I'm going to suggest is using a higher f-stop. You had plenty of shutter speed. You're at 1/4000th of a second. You could have shot this at f16, gotten all of this crisp and sharp, and it would have been a stronger image. Thanks for sending it in, Sam. This is a gorgeous scene, right? The sky looks absolutely beautiful. I took a moment to ponder because I'm looking at this circle and I almost felt like the sun should have been inside of it. Maybe that's what you were going for because it was a self-portrait and you might have, it's very hard to position yourself in the frame when you're not behind the camera. Nonetheless, I'm going to give you a pick. Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I think this might have also worked with a picture frame. Like you could have been holding it up and actually framing a section of this, like saying, look, there's a picture inside of the picture. Great job. Thanks for sending it in, Sarah. It's also really busy. And I think, again, we would have to strive to eliminate some of these distractions, like these lines that are in the background that are kind of detracting from the main, most powerful lines that we want to see there. This picture is off balance because we have this powerful line that it just kind of goes to the dead center. It feels like this part is much heavier than the rest of the image, so you could recompose it. This line, I think, would be more compelling if it were either completely vertical or if it were at a steeper angle like this, which you would get by shifting yourself to the right a little bit. So this kind of goes with what I was saying earlier about angles looking deliberate. It doesn't feel deliberate to me because it's like almost vertical, but not quite. This feels weird to me because these are clearly white, but the luminance has been dropped so that they're not white. You see what I mean? Like it feels a little weird because they're just gray. So let's try to just return that to white. We don't need to blow it out too much, but it just feels weird to me. Anyway, I would also question whether that yellow color is what you want to be the main part of the picture. You could just adjust the overall hue and make it something completely different. Okay, nice simple shape here, but at the same time, not necessarily, a little bit too cluttered to be just a compositional study of lines because we have all these lines in the background that detract from the main honeycomb. So you could overcome that by making it a background, including some sort of focal point, but it can be easier said than done. Here we see a pattern, a texture, which I think is really nice. Depending on the format and how it's presented, I think you could lose what you're saying because there was so much repetition. So cropping in might work a little bit better just by showing the detail larger in unison. So I'm going to brighten it up a little bit. And clearly we have these lines that bring the focal point here. And I guess they are stepping in unison. I think that might be what they mean. One of the challenges here is, again, that kind of amount of contrast between the main subjects and the background. See how she's gray and the background is gray. If they were wearing like a bright white dress or wearing complete black, we might have the additional contrast. Another option might be to crouch down a little bit and get their outfits against this brighter background just so there's a little more pop. But positioning yourself and waiting for the right subject is what's going to make a shot like that really work. I'm going to go into the grid view and just see if I can find some thumbnails that grab my attention. Wow, I got through most of the pictures today. I know we can't get to everybody's pictures. It's impossible, but we do the best that we can. This has some really powerful lines. Again, yeah, I really like the arrangement of this line here, and these lines up here. And I like the people going up here. I do wish that, I think this might also need a foggy day just because there's so many distractions back here that kind of take away from the simple compositional study. We have some tilt shift effect going on here, kind of making everything look miniature. I can't for the life of me figure out why, like, a little bit of blur like that, like, tricks your brain into thinking everything is miniature. Your brain is dumb, right? Why are you so easily tricked? Sorry. I think it's an interesting shot. I don't know that lines are like contribute. It does have lines in it, but I don't know that they contribute significantly to the composition. And this is as simple as just being lines, I think. But I think you pulled it off. Shooting earlier in the day would bring out some more interesting color in the sky. And once again, all the extra detail behind these powerful white beams is going to make it not necessarily work as just a simple compositional study, but you might find a way to simplify it, either visually by increasing the contrast between the bottom of these and letting this fade to black, or by just narrowing it down and finding a simpler subject. Okay, so we have some deliberate Dutch tilt here, or maybe it wasn't deliberate, maybe it was just a night photo and they were working on a tripod and doing a self-portrait and something got tilted. That can definitely happen sometimes. They have an awesome lighted wheel that they rode forward on. It feels a little weird because it looks like they were rolling backwards. I don't know if okay. I'm trying to figure out what happened. I think what happened is they fired the shutter. This person stood still for, I don't know, 4 seconds, which is why they appear here. And then they rolled forward. You know what? If that were the case, it would be a little bit see-through. Sorry, I'm just trying to piece together what happened here, but it is visually confusing because the lines seem to be emanating from the front of the bike as if you were rolling backwards. Like, visually, that's the story it tells. So you could do it differently. You could hit the shutter while the guy is moving and then have him get here and, hold for a good 4 seconds. And that would give him a ghostly figure, but it would be a little bit of something and it wouldn't quite be this like odd backwards thing. Also, he's kind of cropped in half, which makes me think it's a self-portrait because that's the kind of thing that happens when you can't easily see yourself. But shoot wider than you need to. Put, your shoe out there and then go to the camera and see exactly where the shoe is. So you have like a marker. Sometimes I'll even like put a rock or something there so I know exactly where to stand just to help you compose yourself in the frame. I'm just going to flip through and see if I can find something that really catches my eye. Gorgeous picture. Venom, the sky here really makes it interesting. You caught some great color in there. Beautiful. I'm just going to give this one a picture because there's just the gorgeous colors of those boats, the nice symmetry. I think I might even want to crop this top thing out. So let's just level that a little bit and then just going to pull that in just a little bit. Nicely done. This is a gorgeous spot. I might even consider just revisiting here, trying it out in different weather conditions, waiting for the water to come up a little bit. I think it's a great shot. I'm going to give you a pick, but I also think it's worth revisiting because you might be able to improve upon it in different conditions. Here, this is a great example of how powerful fog can be in simplifying clutter in a composition, because I can see enough that there would be a massive amount of distractions here to prevent lines from working. But because there is fog, it's hiding all that. So I'm going to give you a pick. I will also say I see some kind of fringing going on here. So you made some kind of adjustments, and that's giving it away. And just because it's foggy doesn't mean it's not better off being white. But do watch that. It looks like you had a little, maybe it's just, no, there's a little fringing there. Okay, the Brooklyn Bridge. I've taken almost the exact same shot trying to make it work because the lines do converge and they're really powerful. I think we see some over-processing happening from the sky. So you might just back that off a little bit. It doesn't need quite so much because, again, there's like this powerful fringing you have to avoid. Wendy Cooper, one of the very first readers. Wendy's photography has come along so far. Beautiful picture of this kestrel. And it's really nice when wildlife photography can include like compositional elements, and when it's not just an up close picture of a bird, but fits into the scene really nicely. And that does this does it just great. I think I want to add just a little bit of contrast to it, and maybe we can even warm it up just a little bit. Make those yellows a little more orangey. Let's see. I'm just trying to give it more like a sunset feel, because the light in this particular spot is a little bit challenging, and the bird's face is in shadow, so it's losing a little bit of detail, but I think I'll just add a little bit of sharpening for you too. Okay, nice shot. Gonna give you a pick, Wendy. Thanks for sending that in. You know, there's something I find really compelling about this. My only problem is this plastic bag is distracting me a little bit, so I might just have to resort. You know how I hate to crop, but I might just have to do it just this one time. Okay, let's pull in a little bit. I feel better without that plastic bag. I think I like the wide composition, but the distraction was a little bit much for me. Beautiful use of lines. I'm going to give that one a pick. I like it. I think that works well. There were no distractions, and I'm going to give this one a pick too. They waited for the train. We saw a lot of pictures today where it was just the tracks. But you waited for that one interesting thing to come in. Now, the sky, I think, might be overdone just a little bit. But again, I say this a lot. Sometimes what bothers a photographer wouldn't bother a civilian because they don't see so much of it. I did brighten it up a little bit, though. Did I give you a pick already? I'm going to give you a whole bunch of picks. Okay, that's it. I got to the end of it. Siobhan, any closing comments before I can no longer talk?
Yeah, sure. I don't know how you did this whole time.
Me either. I won't be able to talk tomorrow, so.
When traveling, what extent of scouting or pre-production do you do?
Well, it can actually be a lot, depending on what my goals are. But when I'm serious about getting a great shot, it can be really extensive. Google Earth is incredibly useful in finding specific spots. And a lot of places now are actually mapped in 3D. So trees and buildings and stuff, you can actually put yourself down at ground level or near and see exactly where hills are going to be. You can change the time of day, so you can see, move the sun to different positions and see exactly where the sun is going to be in a scene and how it's going to be lighting buildings and such. It's incredible what you can do with Google Earth now. I'll also Google locations and just find images that other photographers have taken to kind of give me some sense for what the most, what spots are really worth visiting and what spots might not be worth visiting. That can be tough though, because I don't want to recreate somebody's picture. And also, I don't know how many times I've seen an awesome picture of a castle or building and thought, I want to visit that spot. And then you get there and it's like covered in scaffolding. I think, I don't know how you go about avoiding showing up at a place when it's under construction or something. I wish there were like real-time feeds of different locations, I suppose you could call or something, but that can be dodgy too. Depending on again, depending on the severity of it, sometimes we'll hire models, which in and of itself can be like a week of work to hire a model, find an outfit, get hair and makeup. But when you really want to make a spot look great, you might need a person to put there as a focal point. So, truth be told, the amount of pre-production that we do in location scouting and planning can take up more time than the actual like shooting. I also say I often contact people in the area, and so if you know somebody in a spot, that can make all the difference, because nobody knows a location like somebody who lives there. So working with a local can be terribly helpful. What else you got, Siobhan?
Well, Edward is begging us to plug the Northrup photography subreddit. So,
oh, okay.
If you troll Reddit, you're there.
Is that just the verb that you use for Reddit, is trolling?
Yes. Yes. Jim Setzer wanted to thank you because he passed his Part 107 test this week, and your video was a vital part of his study regimen.
Oh, congrats, Jim. I will say I haven't heard from anybody who didn't pass that 107 after watching that video. I feel good about that. Like, there's got to be at least like 40 people who've reached out and said, I passed the test because of that video. So if you are interested in getting your FAA drone certification, watch the video because it seems to be working for people.
Yeah, he said there are people charging hundreds of dollars for drone boot camps.
Yeah, I didn't watch any of those videos, but I saw that they existed, and I thought, this is definitely something that I can bang out in a couple of hours. And it did. Well, I mean, it probably took me a full day, because I think we recorded for a couple of hours, and then I had to prep for that. But yeah, I hope I can get it to people without having to pay for it. I want to just find this subreddit. Okay, it's reddit.com/r/Northrup photo. There are only 2 posts, and they're both by Mr. Edward Brown. So we set this up, and now we're just kind of waiting for something to happen there, but I don't know. I guess it could be anything. You could put your picture in there and try to get feedback from other people. We do a lot of things on Facebook now, so it could be the same types of things. You could ask questions, but rather than posting to our photography, you could be posting it to a subset of people who are perhaps nicer. So maybe that's what Northrup Photo is for. Or you could ask questions about us, like, why does Tony's hair look like that? Is Tony really dressed up like the dude from Back to the Future in this picture? I don't know. Whatever questions you want to ask. What happened to Chelsea? That's maybe a question I would make. Like, is she alive? Are they getting a divorce? They look like they were fighting in the last video. These are things I'm going to make posts about. Okay. Anything else, Siobhan, before we get out of here?
Not really.
Okay.
It's a madhouse.
I will say thank you to our sponsor, Squarespace. If you want an awesome website of any type, but especially a portfolio, visit squarespace.com/Tony. You'll get a 14-day free trial when you can make sure everything works, get it looking beautiful, show it to your friends, get feedback on the design. And only once you're really happy with it do you have to pay. And if you do decide to pay, use the coupon code PORTFOLIO to get yourself 10% off. Thanks, Squarespace, for making all this possible. None of this would happen without Squarespace. Therefore, you can't complain about the Squarespace sponsorship. See what I mean? Because I wouldn't be here without Squarespace. Thank you. Thank you, Justin, for making everything work despite challenging conditions. And thanks, Siobhan, for dealing with the random cross-section of humanity that is the internet. Bye, guys. See you next week.
That is all.
We had a Trump troll in the comments.